Okay, so like I just said, y'all received your notification letter, right, with congratulations, you've been approved by our office to study abroad. In that notification letter, there were some next step items that we want to clarify now because we get lots of questions about them. So one, by Monday, March 19th, we would like you to have these two components complete. We'll talk more about health insurance in a bit. You'll see this in your secondary application, the program deposit. However, you do not have to submit that until you've heard back from your program that you've been accepted, right? That makes sense. So even if that's in April or May, that's okay. Just wait to submit that until you hear back. And know that this is a refundable deposit if you do end up going on your program. As soon as you've made your arrangements, you're going to put in your airline information, right? You do not have to have that by Monday, March 19th. We know most of you will have flights booked in the months to come, and that's okay. So just enter that information as soon as you have it. However, this Monday, March 19th, is a hard deadline for the OSA award application, and that's available in your online application. So if you want to be considered for any awards or scholarships through our office, please be sure to complete that by Monday, March 19th.
And I would just emphasize that the program deposit, that's our way of knowing that you have, yes, decided to study abroad. So we like you to wait until you know for sure that you've gotten into your secondary program. But as soon as you know, go ahead and do that. And as Julie mentioned, it becomes part of your application fee, so it's not an on-top fee. Going forward. Okay, so academics abroad. As you all are thinking about studying abroad this semester, consider what it means to study abroad in another location, in another country with different rules around study abroad and around education. So think about you've spent 3 years, 2 years figuring out what it's like to be a college student at Tulane and figuring out the rules of how to work with faculty, how to work in your classroom, and you're about to go to a completely new context. You might show up to classes and find out that you're not going to be able to register for classes until you arrive on campus. That could be the case for some of you. You might arrive to your first day of class and realize, you know what, I'm never going to get a physical syllabus. They're not going to give me one. So you're going to have to figure out how to translate that to your major and minor advisors back here at Tulane. You might go into your first day of class and get a syllabus, but all you get is a long reading list of 50 different texts that you're supposed to read by the end of the class, and you have to figure out what to do with it. So part of the experience of studying abroad is thinking about the fact that you are going to learn a whole new system of education, and that this whole new system of education is the basis for what makes that place unique. So if you are excited about studying in Prague and are finding all of these wonderful things about Prague, instead of finding kind of frustrations in the fact that maybe the education system isn't exactly how you thought it would be, this is also the education system that is producing the society that you're learning about right now. So try to put on your anthropological eye as you're going through that. And part of kind of your getting ready to do that is, as you all should have done now, you should have talked to your academic and major advisors. This is important to keep the conversation going throughout the process because your courses might end up switching and changing around a little bit as you're finalizing. And so you want to make sure that you understand what your particular major advisor needs you to bring back in order to help you get course equivalency. All courses from Study Abroad come back as general elective credit. So any course that you all take will come back on your transcript as general elective credit. If you want major or minor credits upon return, then you will have to have negotiated that with a major or minor advisor. So, any questions about that? Cool. Again, maintain your GPA. So you must have a 3.0 GPA to study abroad. And we do check that at the end of the semester, so make sure that you're meeting all those eligibility requirements. And then finally, you are going to be asked to register for a CRN number. You're going to get an email from us very soon. And this is a placeholder that is going to enroll you in credits that make as just as a placeholder credits that allow you to be a Tulane student for the semester. So it allows the billing and everything to happen as it should at Tulane. So keep your eye out for this email, which will soon be generated by the registrar, that you will need to register for in order for the paperwork to move well.
Yes, so that's before you go abroad, right? And then while you're abroad, a few important things. So you're going to register for a full course load. Two things to consider with this. One is that our office in Tulane requires you to register for a minimum of 12 credits while you're abroad, right? Here on campus, to be a full-time student, you have to be in a minimum of 12 credits. With that said, we encourage you to register for at least 15 credits, whatever that equates to abroad, because let's say you're trying out classes, you realize, oh, this class isn't what I thought, and it's not right for me, it's not a good fit. Well, if you've only registered for 12, you can't drop a class, right? So you're caught between a rock and a hard place. So if you register for 15, you have a little bit of that wiggle room, if you will. Two, please make sure that you're meeting the academic requirements of either your host university and or your program provider abroad, right? So we require you to register in 12. It might be that the University of Cape Town requires you to enroll in 15 or 18, right? Or Edinburgh requires 15 or 18. So keeping that in mind as well, if your host university or program provider's minimum trumps ours, you do have to abide to that. Something very important to know that a lot of students don't know is that grades will appear on your transcript when you come back from abroad as letter grades, but they will not factor into your GPA. Okay, so please keep that in mind. Another thing about grading in abroad is that we really encourage you guys to keep an open and flexible mindset with regards to academics, right? So we know that a lot of the institutions and programs you're going on are going to be much different academically, right? And that it's going to be difficult to adjust, it's going to take some time, and two, that grading systems abroad are different than here. So for example, in France, I believe they grade on a scale of 1 to 20, right? Amanda, you can probably attest to this, and to get a 20 in France would be like unheard of.
Impossible, yeah.
Yeah.
Generally, you're gonna get like 14 out of 20, and they're gonna be like, "Good job," and
like that's really good.
And you think, that's not great, but that's translates to a Tulane, right? So
right.
Something to think about.
Exactly, and so if you get, if you're typically a straight A student at Tulane and you go abroad and you're earning maybe A's but more B's and C's, that's okay. That's okay. And what we want to work with you guys on is being able to articulate the importance of your abroad experience once you come back, and not limiting your abroad experience to letters on your transcript as well. So keeping that in mind. One quick thing, the satisfactory, unsatisfactory policy still applies while you're abroad. So if you want a class, instead of being a letter grade to count as S or U, you have 10 weeks from the start of your program date to let us know.
Great. And as you are enjoying your semester, it's important that you're collecting and keeping all of the work that you produce while you're abroad. When you return from abroad, that's when you're going to go through this process of major and minor equivalencies, and so having as much of your work as possible will really help you facilitate this. So your syllabi, any exams that you take that you're able to keep those hard copies, papers that you've written, all of that material you want to keep it because your faculty may want to see it in order to grant or approve you course equivalency. So make sure that you're keeping that. And as I mentioned before, your courses come back as a 5,000 level general elective credit. So if you want to transition this to major or minor credit or core general what are they called? General core requirements?
Core curriculum.
Core curriculum requirements. You will get a form through your academic advisor to fill out these equivalents, and then you will bring it to our office to have that after your major, minor, your faculty is signed off on it, after your academic advisor is signed off on it, and we will then upload it and switch from a general credit to major or minor credit. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that it may take a little while for grades from abroad to come through, so be patient with this. Sometimes you may get them right away. Sometimes universities abroad may take a really long time to get those grades in. So be patient with this. Realize that too is part of the experience of going abroad. And then the other thing to note, your grades will not be posted if you have not filled out a program evaluation at the end of your study abroad. So be sure to also fill out a program evaluation at the end. And then finally, I would just like to mention that as you're thinking this kind of pre-work for study abroad, it's so important to really take some time to conceptualize what the type of work that you're going to be doing abroad and how that might influence your academic plan here at Tulane. As a faculty member, the best honors theses I've read, the best final papers for my course often come from students who have studied abroad and got very passionate about a particular topic and then have turned that into something moving forward. So think now about what types of connections that you might be having while abroad. It's a time where you often have space for that intellectual curiosity that you might not have as much here because you don't have that same time and space to create these projects and have this intellectual freedom. So I would really like you to kind of think about the study abroad experience as a way of really progressing your academic path. Do you have anything to add about academics abroad that you wish that you had known about transferring credits or anything like that?
Not in like the credit sense, but I think like a really interesting thing to like put in perspective was when you are talking with professors, don't be afraid to go after office hour or go to their office hours or go after class and talk with them. I think that was a really important thing that I got to know about the different professors and the different speakers that came to my classes, which was really cool. And then definitely, I agree. I would say that while I was abroad, I had more time to think about my passions and what I wanted to study, and so I got to do a lot of research with like healthy stations. They're called estaciones saludables there in Argentina, and it's basically like free health preventative services, and it kind of gave me some energy to like pursue health education and communication for my master's, and I just applied for my combined degree. So I think when you're abroad, you'll have a lot of free time, but be sure to maybe split it off into academic free time and also like enjoyment free time.
Great, thanks.
Okay, quick note about finances abroad. Very important. So you will pay your tuition while you're abroad per usual, how you would as if you were on campus. So if you pay X amount in tuition while you're here, you're going to pay that same X amount. So what that means is any scholarship, aid that you currently receive also rolls over and applies to your tuition while you're abroad. So those are good news. If necessary, please meet with a financial aid counselor in the Office of Financial Aid. This is important too because if you do receive an aid package and you're applying for additional aid, the aid you receive could potentially affect your package. So have that conversation if you're in that sort of scenario and be proactive about that. With regards to housing, housing is out of pocket, so you will not pay Tulane for any housing abroad. You will be billed directly by the program provider or host university. So, for example, if you're living with a host family abroad and you're studying in Cape Town with CIEE, you're going to pay CIEE directly for the fees and costs for living with a host family or for an apartment. Yeah, that's about it with financial aid.
So any questions about that billing? So your tuition is Tulane is covering your tuition. You all will cover your housing fee. You'll also see an academic support fee attached to your Tulane tuition, and that gives you access to talk to our office, to talk to your academic advisor, to use a VPN to be able to connect if you need a secure connection abroad. So those kinds of services. Health abroad. So it's easy as you guys are getting ready to go to let the trip just kind of all of a sudden you're excited, but you haven't really done the pre-planning, and then all of a sudden it's time for you to get on the plane. And I would really encourage you all to do some pre-planning and thinking through the local conditions where you're going to go, and as it relates to your health and safety. So in terms of health, one, know the area where you're going. Are you going to be in a mountainous region where you need to make sure you have the proper winter clothing? Are you going to go to a desert area where your asthma or your allergies may act up? Having an awareness of these things and doing the proper preparation is very important. The other thing is that you need to have a conversation with your local physician if you have any pre-existing conditions that you need to have monitored while abroad. So make a plan with your local physician about getting the medications that you need, or about connecting you with someone abroad should you need that to be monitored while you're there. Do a little bit of research on the types of medications that you take. There are certain medications that you will not be able to fly in a plane. So be sure that you know whether or not you're able to travel with this medication. There are many medications that you may not be able to find in your host country, at least under the same name. So make sure that you know what the name is that you would be looking for should you need to get your medication abroad rather than bring it with you. So all of those are the types of conversations that you should be having before you leave. If you have any disability in which you have approval by the Goldman Center, whether it's extra time for tests, whether it's housing options that are more accessible, have those conversations with Goldman now, and our office will work with your university or provider to try to give you the same as much access as we possibly can, and make sure that is able to happen abroad. These things can be complicated abroad because the systems may not be exactly the same, and so it's going to take a little bit of cultural flexibility, but our office is here to help you work through the process in that. And yeah, so I mean, we're good with that.
Yeah, that's great. Health insurance, very, very exciting, but important. Okay, so you are required to demonstrate adequate health insurance both domestically in the United States and internationally while you're abroad. Why do we do that? It's because, for example, worst case scenario, something happens while you're abroad, you need to, for emergency reasons, come back to the United States. Well, guess what? Your Danish health insurance abroad is not going to cover you in the United States, right? So having a conversation, if you're covered, for example, by your parents or under a family plan, make sure that when you come back from abroad, or if you have that emergency situation, they would be covering you here. There are 3 options for coverage abroad, okay? So one is that some program providers already provide and include health insurance in your program cost. So that information, if that applies to you, should be available on your program provider website. If you have any questions about that after this, we are happy to talk with you because we'll likely know whether or not it's included. So another option is to purchase GeoBlue, which we offer through our office. So a few reasons why you can purchase GeoBlue. One is because, let's say for example, your provider doesn't offer insurance, you just need international insurance, right? We have this plan that's pretty comprehensive that you can look into. Another reason some students purchase GeoBlue is because they look into their insurance that's offered through the provider. For example, CIEE automatically enrolls students in what's called iNext insurance. Depending on your individual needs, health needs, you might decide that iNext isn't comprehensive enough for you. And if that were the case, you would be more than welcome to purchase GeoBlue to have on top of that through our office. And if you do want to, we actually purchase it for you and then bill you. And you can contact Joni Vickner in our office. Her email is crystal@tulane.edu, and we would be happy to help you through that. And then very importantly, so every year, you guys should know about this, is that you complete what's called an annual Tulane health waiver if you don't pay for Tulane insurance, right? So if you have, for example, Blue Cross Blue Shield, you're covered by your parents, United Healthcare, whatever it might be, you sign this waiver so that you're not billed and automatically enrolled in Tulane health insurance. You need to also sign this waiver when you go abroad, and you will be able to sign this waiver this summer. You do not want to be paying double insurance while you're abroad, so please, please do make sure that you keep an eye out for the email about this summer. And if you don't sign it, you will be billed. So just please be aware of that.
And health insurance obviously is not the most exciting topic to talk to you all about, but it is a really important one that you all should ask yourself the question, okay, if I get sick abroad, what would I do? Where would I go? Who would pay for it? What would I use? What would I show the hospital when I arrive? Because you need to know the answer to that question before you get abroad. It's the worst to arrive in a country, especially if you don't speak the language well where you're going, to find yourself sick and then to have to try to figure out how you use the hospital system, how you figure out how all this works. So think about this now. How would you use your health insurance if you were abroad? Make sure that you can answer that question. Do you guys have any follow-ups? Yeah.
So God forbid this would happen to you, but I unfortunately had a minor hospital visit while I was abroad. I would say to make sure if you have an insurance such as iNext, I'm not sure about GeoBlue if it's reimbursement based or not, but iNext in particular is reimbursement based health insurance, so you have to pay for it out of pocket if you're in a medical emergency, and then they reimburse you. So keep all of those receipts, keep your medical records, make sure you have all that information to send to the insurance company, because otherwise it's a huge headache that you don't want to deal with on top of being sick already. So hopefully you're healthy the entire time, nothing happens to you, but make sure to keep all those records, as well as if you're going to be traveling outside the country you're in. Like I was in France, but something happened to me while I was in Italy. Know how your travel insurance policies work if they are applying in the countries that you're traveling to.
And also think about who your network is, because that's another thing. Oftentimes when you're sick and all of a sudden you realize you have to go to the hospital, it's something that you don't want to do alone. So would it be the director of the program that you would call? Would it be a friend? Who is it that's going to go? And you may not know the answer to that question now because you're not on site, but that's one of the first things that you should sort of try to figure out when you get there. Okay, if there was an emergency, I had to go to the hospital, who is that number that I'm going to call? Who's going to help me navigate this system? And that's part of this next moment of kind of talking about safety and security. The biggest way to keep yourself safe while abroad is to be conscious, to be asking yourself these kinds of questions about, if you do get sick, about, what are my surroundings, to be aware of these kind of things. So one is a bit of common sense, thinking about sort of pickpocketing or other sorts of things, which we'll talk about a little bit. But then there are some kind of programs that you can do that are going to keep you safe. So one thing that you can do is enroll in travel.state.gov. So in the field of study abroad, people are theorizing that today we live in a world risk society. And what does that mean? It means threats of terrorist attacks, threats of violence are now global threats. And we see it in the media, we see it in our everyday, that more and more there's a fear, right? There's risk becomes something that we're constantly trying to navigate. Travel.state.gov has something called the STEP program. First, if you should all go to travel.state.gov and look at the country that where you're going to be traveling. They give you a long report of the safety and security, a briefing. So, is it a place where there's high malaria? Is it an area where there's high risks of pickpocketing? It gives you kind of the breakdown of the risks that one might see. And again, these are written in this safety and security language, and it seems scarier than it is sometimes, but it's good for you to have that preparation, that you are aware of the environment where you're going and you're over prepared. And the other thing is to enroll in the STEP program. This is you just go in and sign yourself in, and it gives you security alerts. So if something did happen, if there was a bombing in a subway station somewhere in your vicinity, you would hear about it. And so you'd get an alert to your phone, someone would check in on you. You could check yourself in so that we know that you're safe. It's one option.
Okay, one more thing. So just to demystify and clear up some confusion, in some of your online applications you might have seen something called ISOS. Did anyone see that? Okay, please ignore that. That is something that we're transitioning out of. So if you still see language regarding ISOS in your application, just let us know after this. We'll take care of that for you. But instead of ISOS, we're transitioning into this wonderful feature in safety and security for you guys called Global Rescue. So Global Rescue is something that our office will actually enroll you in, but this is an asset to you guys because Global Rescue is a service where it's not, just to be clear, it's not an insurance, but it's an assistance kind of service, support service. So if you're abroad, let's say, like Amanda, you were studying in France, but you were in Italy and you got sick in Italy, right? And so if you're not in your host country, but you're traveling in Europe for the weekend and you're in Italy and you get sick and you don't speak Italian, you're completely unfamiliar with like the Italian healthcare system, you don't know what to do, well, you can contact Global Rescue and they can tell you where the nearest physician is, they can advise you on how to move forward in English, not in Italian too. So that's very helpful. And again, we will enroll you in Global Rescue, so you don't have to worry about signing up online. However, we highly recommend that you guys download the Global Rescue app to your phone. If you just go to the App Store and search Global Rescue, it'll come up. And it's the kind of thing where take 5 minutes, 10 minutes to sign up, right? Put it on your phone, and you always have it as a tool in your back pocket when you're abroad, right? So this is a really, really good precautionary kind of measure to take with downloading the app, but we will also automatically enroll you. Do you have anything to add to that?
Did you say it gives you the 911, local
Oh,
911
yes,
numbers?
it does. So I didn't, thank you. Global Rescue will give you the local 911 numbers, as Annie just said. So, right, if you are in Senegal and you dial 911, guess what? The police and paramedics aren't going to come, right? There's a different 911 number all over the world. And so if you don't know what that number is, Global Rescue will tell you. And two, I think they have a feature, at least Scott said, where you press, like, not to be played with or messed with, but you press an emergency button, you hold it for 3 seconds, and then they'll contact you immediately. So that's something too. There's all these really cool features in it, so maybe download it, take a look, and let us know if you have questions about that.
Great. So those are sort of the big logistical tools to enroll yourself. Look up state.gov, STEP, Global Rescue. But more than that, to think about what your strategy will be for keeping yourself safe. Who would be your networks to kind of be safe? What is your role in keeping people around you safe as well? So thinking about the place where you are, knowing sort of how you operate in that particular space, and knowing other people around you. So there might be places where, you know, you might be a male on the program and say, I can come and go anytime I want. I can leave the bar at 2 a.m. But it may not be okay for one of the females in your group to do the same thing. So that becomes this moment where you need to be an ally. So thinking about that role that you will play in keeping both yourself and your friends safe in all those moments. And when you arrive on campus, you're going to get a lot of safety and security briefing that'll be that'll be specific to your area by your host providers. And so really follow this advice. When you arrive somewhere and you are not yet familiar with what particular neighborhoods or areas that you can walk in, it's really great to hear that local advice. And it may feel that you're just getting bombarded with things, but keeping that information is really important. You know, what are those little things you're going to do to not make yourself a target? You know, walking around with your Google map on your iPhone is probably not a good idea. So if you need your Google map to figure out how to get to A to B, what are the ways that you're going to look at your map without having it out the whole time? So those are the types of little things that you have to figure out to be kind of a cultural sleuth and figure out how to operate. Do you guys have any safety and security additions?
I would say if you're in a country that, for instance, the cultural norms for dressing, let's say I was in Senegal, women aren't really wearing shorts or short skirts or anything. So even though it was very hot out, to blend in and to not make myself a target, I would wear long skirts, long pants, things like that. So understanding the culture of where you're going, as well as I think in a lot of major metropolitan cities, I think the apps are a really cool thing. I know in Paris in particular, there's an app that can tell you if there's been a terrorist event or an attack, and I know probably in a lot of other European cities, there's something like that. It tells you how to get to safety, it tells you how close you are to the embassy, what kind of solutions you can take going forward. So I'd recommend looking into that and sort of downloading one of those if you're worried about that. My mom was very adamant about me downloading that, so it really went a long way to appease her as well. So just things like that, I think. Did you have anything to add?
I would say you definitely know where you're going. At least in Argentina, they don't have an Apple product market. So a lot of people on my program had their iPhones taken because we did have that situation where we're always on our phones looking up where to go and everything, and it was a very stressful situation. So definitely keep track of your belongings as well as know your surroundings, and definitely check out if the city that you're going to has an app. Like in Buenos Aires, they had something where it was like the Google Map equivalent, and it was really cool because it had all the subway lines and everything. So it was really nice to have that local resource. But definitely keeping track of your belongings and like knowing like maybe if I'm just going out at night, maybe I don't have to bring my passport, or I don't have to bring a certain document, or like I don't have to bring my iPhone or something. Like just knowing what to take and how to keep it safe is pretty key to a good experience.
Yeah, being in a group, especially when there's a tendency, especially at the beginning of study abroad, to want to clump together with others, and you often are during orientation, and there's a false sense of security because you're sitting at a table having lunch with everyone that you know, and it's easy just to forget and leave your phone just on the table and look away in 1 second and it's gone. Or you put your bag over the back of your chair because, oh, that seems normal, I'm just going to have my bag right here. Think twice. Think twice.
Okay, so I know this is not the most fun topic, but definitely important is discipline. So please know that when you go abroad, even though you are international, not on Tulane's campus, you are still required to comply with all Tulane rules and regulations, including the Tulane Student Conduct and Honor Code. You are also required to comply with your host university and program providers' rules and regulations, okay? So please be aware of that. A lot of your host universities and program providers will give to you, and if they won't, it's published on their website, like handbooks, guides for rules, regulations. It is not a bad idea to be familiar with those and know what those rules are. And yes, violations committed abroad will be reviewed by the Newton Tulane College Dean's Office, so just because you're abroad doesn't mean you get away with it. We hope that no one has any issues, but it is important to know that. Going off of that as well, you know, with local laws, it's so important to be cognizant of what the local laws are and know that they're going to be different than New Orleans. For example, here there's an open container law, right? So you can legally, if you're of age, walk on the street with an alcoholic drink in your hand, right? That is not the case in so many parts of the world, and you have to remember that laws differ all over. Or for example, if you're studying in Amsterdam, you know, you can smoke pot in Amsterdam. You can't do that in other parts of the world. So please be cognizant, be aware, and know that. And so with that said, local laws, do not get locked up abroad. This has happened, truly, I'm not making this up. Students have been locked up abroad. If you are locked up abroad, we cannot bail you out. No one can help you. Please don't get locked up abroad. Follow the local laws. We know you will. We know you will. We have nothing but, we know you have nothing but the best intentions, but know that this is serious.
And Julie, I just want to emphasize that the times this has happened, oftentimes it's a cultural misunderstanding.
Yes.
That that the students have done something that in their home setting would not have necessarily been an issue, but where they were, it was an issue. So make sure that you know what these laws are. And make sure that you're sort of learning about the local culture, what you can and cannot do. The best advice is to follow those around you. So if you're, and even from the little things, if you go into a subway station, and Brianna likes to talk about how in Prague, people are very quiet in public settings. What her American study abroad students tend to jump in the subway and, hey, what's up? And they're talking to each other, whereas people in Prague tend to be more reserved. Think about especially when you're out at night in party settings, if people are drinking but they're reserved, if you're making a big scene and jumping on the table, you might be causing a problem for yourself. This was an example of one of the things that later led to someone having a bad situation with the authorities.
Okay, so logistics. As part of your online Tulane application, y'all were asked to submit a scanned copy of your passport. If you, at the time of your application, did not have a current copy or you were renewing your passport, that is okay, it's not a problem. If you have renewed it and you now have a valid copy, please email us a PDF. Your passport needs to be valid until, what, May, June, July? Yeah. Please be aware of that. And if you do need to renew your passport, do it immediately as soon as possible, because you will need a valid passport to apply for a visa. So applying for a visa is something that our office is actually pretty much completely hands-off with. The reason for that is that y'all are going to places all over the entire world. Every country has different regulations and rules with regards to student visas that change by the minute. They really do. They change every day, and so your program provider or host university will most likely be providing you with some kind of guidelines for applying for a visa. So keep an eye out from them. Once you're accepted, they should be providing some sort of instructions or guidelines for that.
And you can and talk directly with the consulate. So if you're
Yes.
going abroad, write the consulate and they can help you figure out what to do.
Yes, and going off of that too, again, we don't advise for the visa process. They're all different, but as a general rule, you can expect possibly to have to visit the consulate for the country you're going to. So for example, I studied in Brazil, right? And I'm from Chicago originally, and I was lucky because there's a Brazilian consulate in Chicago. So I could easily go in person to the consulate with all my documents, with my passport, get everything squared away. Had there not been a Brazilian consulate in Chicago, I might have had to fly to the closest state where there was one, or pay for a third-party provider to do that for me. So it's a really good idea now to kind of research where the closest consulate is, be aware of that, and also do this now because the consulates are not, let's say this, they're very bureaucratic and all about bureaucracy, and you know, if you're getting a new passport and you need to expedite it, you can pay a fee for that. You cannot do that for a visa. You cannot. So please don't be rushing at the last minute to get a visa. Take care of it now. Start looking into it. I would say that. And then with regards...
And then I would also just say that the visa process can be very frustrating. And I also ask you to consider what it's like on the other side for international students coming to the United States to think about getting a visa to the U.S. And think about, you know, while you might be very upset that it's taking you a day or that you have to drive from New Orleans to Houston to get a visa, ask yourself, how does someone who is from the country where you're going to and wants to come and study for a semester to the U.S., what is their process like? And figure out the answer to that, and it might make you feel better.
Another logistical thing, money, right? So how are you going to pay for things abroad, right? Do you usually use a debit card here in New Orleans? Do you use a credit card? If so, you're going to want to maybe use that abroad, so make sure you speak to your bank to let them know you're going abroad. If you don't, they're going to all of a sudden see transactions in South Africa and block your card. So you do not want that to happen. You do not want to be without a way to have money. Bring cash as well, you know, maybe take out currency or order currency of the country you're going to and have that handy so that when you get to the airport, should they not accept dollars, right, you're going to want to have pesos or whatever it might be of the currency where you're going. Learn about the exchange rate as well, right, so know that the cost of living of where you're going might be more or less expensive than New Orleans, and budget for that. So please, please consider creating a budget for going abroad. I think we're going to ask you guys if you have tips as to budgeting for abroad, any financial tips or things that you might recommend to students.
Grocery shop is a lot cheaper than eating out, at least in Prague. It's like really cheap, so definitely recommend cooking, learning to cook. That's like where I started, learning to cook.
That's awesome.
I think also researching beforehand what the cost of living is in the city you're going to and how it might differ from New Orleans and factoring that into your plans. A city like Copenhagen is about 30% more expensive than New Orleans, so you're going to have to factor that into your spending plans, your budgeting, how you're going to have to change your lifestyle a little bit maybe to accommodate that. And you can look on websites like Numbeo and Expatistan in particular. You can Google them and they'll tell you how the cost of living in your host city differs from New Orleans or from where your home is and how much a typical person spends on their cost of living per month.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with that. And I would say also, like, know if you want to travel afterwards or during your program, because then that way it really does give you a better sense of budgeting. Because I knew I wanted to go travel in the country afterwards, so having enough money for that and enjoying that as well as my time during abroad was really important.
Wonderful. And one more thing, so Amanda Wright is one of our wonderful peer advisors in the office, and she's working on a document right now with regards to comparing cost of living in New Orleans to all of the destinations where you guys are going abroad, and kind of estimating and calculating monthly expenses and what that might look like. So we'll email you with that information once it's ready, but that's going to be a fantastic resource for you that she's working on.
Great. So now we're getting kind of into the final stage logistics. So you all will be making your travel arrangements, and once you make your travel arrangements, make sure that you upload that into your application at OSA, so we have that information as well. And then think a little bit about the logistics of all of your travel. So if your phone was to die when you got off the plane in the country where you're studying abroad, would you know what to do? So what address are you going to when you get off the phone? You might get off the plane. You may have it written in your phone, but you might also write it down in person so that you know that. Is someone picking you up at the airport? Are you getting in a taxi? Do you get a taxi from a taxi stand, or do you go to a booth? How does it work? So figuring out all of those arrival logistics are very important. This links up with the changing money as well. Make sure that you've thought through all of those little logistics in terms of your arrival. Some of you might end up deciding you're going to arrive a few days early of the program. Where will you be staying if you do that? Make sure you think about all of those things and write it down.
Okay, a little bit on communication, right? So here we write to Facebook or not to Facebook, and we of course know that Facebook is one of the many platforms now that everyone's using, right? We're using Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, I'm sure I'm missing ones. But thinking very intentionally about how you are using social media abroad and how you are portraying your study abroad destination and your travels to other places, right? So and there are so many different regards in which we can consider this. So let's say you're having a bad day and you're really dealing with culture shock today, and it's really rough, and you're really upset because you didn't understand that you had to stick your hand out to stop the bus. You thought just standing at the bus stop was enough, and you're like, oh, this is so frustrating, and you post about it or something on social media, right? So thinking about the impact of that message to everyone else, to the outer world, to your friends, your family, your mutual friends on Facebook, whoever it might be, right? And then two, knowing that you are going to have lots of friends who are in the same place or different places abroad, and who are going to be posting pictures like, oh, this is so fun, this is amazing, and you might not be feeling that way, right? You might be struggling a lot and having a really hard time, and that's okay. That's okay. Knowing that you don't have to compare your abroad experience to others based on what you see on social media as well. Do you want to add to that?
So I think number one is coming up with a plan, of a communication plan, because most likely the way in which you use social media is going to alter when you're abroad. In different ways, and you have to figure out what those ways are for you. And then it's important to have those conversations with people beforehand, because your parents might get really stressed out because all of a sudden you don't connect on social media for 3 weeks and they have no idea where you are. And then we get the phone call, I think my son has been kidnapped abroad. So make sure that you are having those conversations and preparing. Be kind to your mom and dad. They're poor little hearts. Make sure that you figure out a plan of how you're gonna communicate. Are you gonna do a blog that you're gonna post once a week? Are you gonna call them on Sundays? Have those types of conversations. Also, those of you that are involved in clubs or in leadership roles on campus, that's another thing to think about. It's often hard making that adjustment abroad and feeling like all of a sudden this piece that was so important to your life, you're now disconnected from it in certain ways. So think through it, and figure out what your communication plan will be with that club. Are you going to disconnect completely? Well, if so, talk about with that leadership organization about how that's going to be, and so that you don't feel on either end that you're dropped off the face of the earth or that you don't have a place to come back to. So one is create that communication plan, figure it out. And then two, as Julie was talking about, these images about the place that you post, for many people, the only idea that they're going to have about Prague or about Argentina or about Senegal are going to be the images that you are going to post. You are the source of information about that place to a portion of your online life, and that is a powerful place, and we need to continue to think about what that means in terms of how we post, what images we're posting of others. and be conscious about that. So, do you all have advice about technology abroad?
Well, I'm definitely guilty because I'm a photographer, so I love taking photos and I love Instagram and I really love sharing photos, but it was hard and difficult because it was like, you don't want to flood other people's pages, especially because like I have a lot of friends who are in science classes and they weren't able to study abroad. So being very considerate of knowing about their lives as well, and just knowing that like Facebook, like life goes on and you should just be in the moment and don't be caught up in like being like, oh, I gotta share this, like be in the moment and experience it rather than like, oh, I gotta Snapchat it. Like there's a time and place for it, but like be in the moment first. I would recommend that.
I would also say that the internet connection situation or the data situation might be a little different where you're going. You might not be able to refresh your Instagram, it might be kind of frustrating for you on a minute sense. It doesn't seem like a big deal now, but when you're there and you're just trying to connect with people, your FaceTime won't go through with your best friend. It can be kind of frustrating, so I would sort of prepare for that and make sure you have other ways to communicate with people, maybe even sending postcards, things like that, depending on where you're going to be, might be a good strategy.
Who here has experienced culture shock before? I know I have. Yeah? Okay. Can you talk about the culture shock you've experienced? Like, where was it? What happened?
Well, mine was at Tulane.
What the different phases are of culture shock, right? So, you get there and you're in what we call this honeymoon stage. You're like, oh my God, I love it here. Like, I can't believe I'm in Brazil. This is amazing. The beach is right there. Like, what is happening? This isn't real life, right? And then for example, I'll use a personal example, right? So I have to take the bus to class, public transport. And I'm from the suburbs of Chicago, so growing up I was very privileged to have a car and to not navigate public transportation, right? So go to the bus stop and I'm there and really nervous, feeling kind of anxious, but oh good, I see the bus coming and it's the right number. So I'm like, yay, I'm here, and the bus just goes right past me. Like, what the hell? Why didn't you stop? Right? I didn't know that I actually had to wave and put my hand out. I thought me standing there was going to be enough for the bus driver to stop. Right? So, okay, shoot, I'm really upset, I'm really frustrated, but it's okay because now I know this and I begin adjusting, right? So I'm adjusting my behavior to adapt to the local culture and the way that things are run. And eventually I accept that. And every day I go to class and I take the bus and I put my hand out and the busman stops and it's fine. And I'm basically living like a local, right? So kind of thinking about culture shock now is important in preparing yourself. Annie, I'm sure you want to add to that.
I think technology plays a role in this too, because you're going to be seeing these images of other people's abroad experiences. You're going to be seeing Facebook from, or Snapchat or whatever it is you see the most, back home up at Tulane, and they are going to be, always positive is how we tend to show things on social media. And that is going to make you feel those lows sometimes. There's some recent studies that have come out that shows that the more that you connect when you're in a situation of culture shock, the deeper that your culture shock becomes, because you're navigating this online world. So it's important to realize that, as Julie mentioned, these are phases and that they pass. But also to realize what are the things that you're going to do to take care of yourself. So you are going to feel those lows. There are going to be times when you're abroad where you're going to regret it, where you're going to be like, I don't know if this is the right decision. How are you going to get through it? What are those things that you need? Do you need to bring your favorite candy from home that you want to have in your suitcase to pull out? Or there's some movies you want to download on your computer that if you just need to take a few hours and chill in your room, you do that? Is it your favorite book? Is it that you go out and play soccer? What is it? But think about how you're going to go through these ups and downs, because they know that it's going to happen, that it is normal, and be able to figure out when is it a normal low and when am I actually going through a real crisis, because this is a kind of an up and down that is quite natural of study abroad. Do you guys have any thoughts and moments where you felt culture shock, or how did you guys deal with it?
Yeah, I think everyone can experience culture shock in various ways, varying degrees, depending on where you're going. The types of culture shock you're going to experience are going to be different, especially if you're living in a host family. You not only have to adapt to the culture of the community, but also to the family you're living in. So, for instance, I come from a single parent household where I have no siblings, and in Senegal I was living in a home with 5 host siblings, 2 host parents, and then a bunch of other community players that were filtering in and out of the house. So it's a very lively and very different kind of setting. And so I would just suggest, also the movie thing really helped me. I downloaded my favorite movies on my computer. Just sort of finding things that bring you comfort. If that's, whatever you need to do, take the time for yourself, recognize that, but also recognize that the culture shock isn't going to last forever. When you're freaking out about it, it's going to take a few days, and then you're going to be loving it again. So it comes in waves, and it might not be one wave for you. It might be one wave, and then another wave hits, and then another wave hits as you learn more, as you experience more. It's all good. It's going to be great.
I totally get the feeling, and sometimes it could be little waves or big waves. Like, I'll be real with y'all, when I saw everyone singing Jesse McCartney, I felt so, felt so bad that I was missing out, and everybody was so happy, and all my friends were there. And I felt really bad. I was like, I'm missing this, and I wish I was at Tulane for the homecoming carnival and everything. But at the same time, it was good to just know that all my friends back at Tulane were thinking of me, and I kept up with them. So it was good to touch base with them. But then also it kind of influenced me to get outside my bubble and maybe go to an art museum or go to a new restaurant or go somewhere else in the city, take the subway line and go to a different neighborhood. So it fueled me to experience the culture shock in a way, and just to embrace it and to just learn so many new things about a different culture.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, because transforming those kind of down moments into something positive. A semester goes by so fast; it's a blink of an eye, and especially when you're adjusting to a whole new culture, the amount of time that you all are going to have to dive in is actually really small. So with that said, one of the best ways to kind of get through culture shock is to do some of the pre stuff now, so that you're prepared. The more that you know about the place before you arrive, the less of these kind of lows that you'll have, because you won't be as hitting such a big shock when all of a sudden you open up to someone in a certain way and they don't respond the way that you think they are. Oh wait, what? This is a cultural thing. It's not because they don't like me, and you're kind of navigating that in the first time. So here are just a couple of resources to think about. One is start doing that pre-reading about your host country right now. This is for culture shock, but this is also for the classes that you're going to take. If you think about it, you guys are going sophomore, junior year. Most likely you're enrolling in kind of mid to upper level classes in the host university. And if you're taking literature, history, politics, international development courses, you're taking that with students who have grown up in this host society and already have a base of knowledge that you all don't have. So if you don't get yourself up to that kind of base knowledge of who's the president, what does the political system look like, what are the major historical events that I should know about this place? If you don't have that, you're at a major disadvantage going into your class. And then you're at a major disadvantage too in these kind of day-to-day interactions. So start reading now about the basics. Think about, so here are just a couple of things for you to kind of know and be able to answer. Do you know who the major sports teams are? That might be a big point of talking. Do you know what are these things that makes this society who they are and are important to this location where you're going to be studying? And finally, survival language skills. For those of you, for all of you that are studying abroad in non-English speaking countries, whether you're doing so for language immersion or whether you're going somewhere where you may not have taken the language before, like Prague, having at least a little bit of knowledge of the language means so much. You want to separate yourself from being kind of the stereotypical tourist, right? That assumes that everyone is going to speak English no matter where you go, right? Just one hello, goodbye, thank you in the host language goes such a long way. So if you are going and studying abroad in a non-English speaking location, consider this. And you don't have to become fluent. I'm not asking you to become fluent before your arrival. But you should be able to have those basic greetings. So when you are in a store, you can say thank you, or you can say hello. that is going to really separate your experience, and it's going to lead you to do things and to have connections with people that otherwise you might not be able to.
And going off of that for survival language skills, does anyone here know what Duolingo is or have Duolingo? Okay, great. I see a lot of heads. Yes, awesome. Duolingo is amazing, at least I think. Can't rave about it enough. It's a free app you can get on your phone. You know, for example, I did a site visit to DIS in Copenhagen, never been to Copenhagen, don't speak a lick of Danish, and I downloaded Duolingo, and I was able to say hello, like thank you, mantak, you know, all of these little things that made such a difference in my day-to-day with people, and I was only there for a week. You're going to be there for a semester or a year, right? So even just doing that, and also Duolingo is really fun. It's like an addicting game on your phone. I'll be up at night at 12 a.m. like addicted to Duolingo. My roommate will hear me murmuring weird things in Italian. She's like, what are you doing? But it's a great thing and it's free. So that's one thing I would highly recommend for survival language skills. Yeah.
And I would also know if you have a certain allergy or you are a vegetarian, I would learn the words for that. My friend, she had a bad homestay experience because she is glucose, she has celiac and she's lactose intolerant, and she could not have either of those items. And Argentina loves their milk, butter, like their pasta and like everything. So it was just very hard for her. So like if she had known a little bit more about how to say like, oh, can't have those things, or I had a friend who was vegetarian and like she was struggling a lot, so maybe learning about different things to eat and what you can eat would be important.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay.
And so finally, to end, there are some resources on campus that you all can connect with to start some of your intercultural learning right now. First, there are international students on this campus right now doing what you are doing. And so, how many of you guys know an international student on campus? Have a friend that's an international student? So a few of you, right? So think about your experience going abroad. Wouldn't it mean so much to you if someone were to come up in your next semester, were to come up to you and say, hey, how's it going? Can I show you around? Or let me show you where a cafe is, or let me show you, this is a Tulane tradition, let me introduce you. You can start your intercultural experiences right here on Tulane's campus. Right now, you can be playing the role that you hope that someone will be playing for you in a semester. So connect. There's a great place to do that, which is actually happening right now. It happens every Tuesday between 2 and 4 in the mezzanine level of the LBC called Global Cafe, a meeting place of internationally minded Tulaneans. Come up, introduce yourself, find one of us. We can help you introduce yourself if it seems if it's hard to just go out of the blue. You may find we can introduce you to people that are maybe from your same country where you're going to be studying abroad. So think about doing that. At Global Cafe for all study abroad students on April 24th. Mark your calendars now. We'll send out a reminder. And then we have the SARC program, so our Study Abroad Returnee Contacts. You've heard from one of the SARCs today. So these are students that are interested in talking about their study abroad experience and giving you advice. That's a great resource for you to reach out. So you can find them on the Study Abroad Returnee Contact. Also, if you go to the program brochure for your program and you scroll down to the end, you'll see a list of students that have gone on your program and want to give advice about it. So shoot them an email, tell them, I'm interested, I need help thinking about what to pack, or can you tell me your favorite restaurants and coffee shops? These students are there to help. Yeah. So with that, are there any questions for Julie, myself, or the peer advisors and SARCs?